Good afternoon, fellow colleagues, and good afternoon, Dr. Adley. We are Group 9 and we're presenting on sexual transmitted infection. Group 9 members consist of Ashley Rose, Shakira Strong, Diana Marshall, and myself, Midland Francois. Several factors of healthcare awareness among any population. These factors may be social, cultural, economic, or religious belief. They hinder healthcare accessibility and awareness to different degree. Additionally, factors such as gender, educational level, income, age, and marital status can impact the accessibility of health services. Therefore, the purpose of this study is to examine how attitude, knowledge, perception correlates with preventing sexual transmitted infection. In our survey, we conducted a survey of 109 persons. In this survey, there was 109 respondents who were required to answer various questions. Out of 109 persons took the survey, 42 were male and 67 were female. Participants between the age of 18 to 35-year-old were the largest group, followed by participants between the ages of 36 to 52 years old. 41 participants were married for the first time, 32 participants were single, 12 were remarried, 8 were a steady relationship, 6 were living with their partner, 5 were separated, and 5 were divorced. 40 individuals answered that they had children, and 69 had no children.
Good afternoon, Dr. Adley, fellow group members, viewing audience, and group members of 9. I'm student nurse Marshall, and I'll be presenting on interpretation of my demographic scale and the descriptive scale. As mentioned by nursing students Midland Francois, we have 109 participants in this study. I'm going to be using some alphabetical terms. N, capital or uppercase N, representing the population of the study, lowercase n, representing the sample size. The majority of the participants in the studies were female. It represents uppercase N, 67, lowercase n, 61.5%, which were females. The remainder, uppercase N, 42, and lowercase n, 38.5%, were male. A frequency table was used to analyze the distribution of a variable. Participants between the ages of 18 and 35 years old was the largest group of participants, which is represented by uppercase N, 54, lowercase n, 49.5%, and who actually took this survey. Individuals between the ages of 36 to 52 years old, the second largest, representing uppercase N, 37, lowercase n, 33.9%. However, there were uppercase N, 18 participants, and lowercase n, 16.5% individuals that were 53 years and older. The intended age for the surveys was 18 to 52 years, which represent uppercase N, 91, and lowercase n, 83.4%. Therefore, they were 53 years and older, uppercase N, 18, lowercase n, 16.6%, could not be used in this data analysis, mainly because this represented the exempted category of the studies. Also included in the demographic studies of the total population of represented by uppercase N, 109, who took the studies, were married for the first time, single participant, remarried, or in a steady relationship, living with a partner, or divorced or separated. The data analysis for those was interpreted as participants who took the study, representing the ones that are married for the first time, revealed that participants accounted for was uppercase N, 32, lowercase 29.4%. Remarried category included uppercase N 12, lowercase n 11.0%. Steady relationship, uppercase N 8, lowercase n 7.3%. Living with a partner, uppercase N 6, lowercase n 5.5%. Lowercase n representing 4.6%. However, uppercase N 25 and lowercase n 8.5% were individuals who did not answer the question. Out of 109 persons that did this survey, participants of 69, lowercase n 63.3% did not have a child, and the remainder population 40, lowercase n 36.7% answered yes to having a child. Thus, more persons who took a part in this research had no children. However, we identified that most people that took this survey have been married at some point in their lives. In doing this interpretation, I think it's a good idea to analyze the correlation between children and STDs, attitudes, or scales. In continuation of the demographics scales, this area covers education or some type of training, undergraduates, the highest level of education, participants with some secondary education or completed some high school, also postgraduate completion. Individuals that had some additional training represented 31, lowercase n equaling 28.4%, undergraduates totaling 28, with lowercase n 25.7%, was the second highest. Who had the second highest education represented 28 of the population, and lowercase n 25.7%. High school category represented 17 and lowercase n 15.6%. And post-graduation completed accounted for uppercase 11 and lowercase n 10.1% of these participants. In doing our data analysis for outliers, we included the three scales: knowledge, attitude, and perception. In our knowledge scale, we had 10 outliers indicated in the data analysis, but there were 2 extreme outliers. In the attitude scale of extreme outliers, we had a total of 4 in total found, and all 4 of those outliers were said to be extreme outliers. In the perception scale, we found 7 outliers, and we had no extreme liars in this data analysis. For our descriptive scale, the data interpretation, the mean from knowledge was equal to 3, which indicates the average participant had little or none knowledge. The direction was given to skewness and of the slope of the scale that we interpreted, which indicate the distribution was skewed positively. The mean is 2.49 and the standard deviation is 2.217, which equals to 1.944 or 6.924, which estimates the range of the participants in the knowledge scale. On the attitude scale, the main scale was 1. This indicates the average participants, which showed a positive attitude. In the attitude scale, it showed that the line the linear line was not skewed. So it indicated that the participants were seemingly neutral in their decision. The range of the participants was estimated between 0.556 or 1.416. The mean of the perception scale was 7. This indicates the average participants have little perception. The skewness is symmetrically distributed. The range of participants' perception is estimated between 2.016 to 11.264. The correlation analysis or interpretation will be done by Shakira Strawn, who is the next person to speak.
Good afternoon, Dr. Adley. Good afternoon, fellow colleagues. My name is Shakira Strawn, and I'll be speaking to you today on correlation analysis based on our research. So, for our research question, we wanted to know, how does awareness correlate with sexually transmitted diseases in young adults? From our research, results has indicated that both knowledge and attitude had a correlation coefficient of 0.208, and that the p-value for this correlation coefficient was 0.030. This was based on 100% of participants answering questions. So, the hypothesis used to test for this p-value was young adults who have a positive attitude towards sexually transmitted diseases will reduce the risk of contracting and transmitting a sexually transmitted disease. The null hypothesis was that there will be no relationship between a positive attitude in young adults and a reduction in contraction and transmission of sexually transmitted diseases. Hypothesis 2. Young adults with knowledge about sexually transmitted disease will reduce the risk of disease transmission. Again, null hypothesis stated that there will be no relationship between knowledge in young adults and a reduction in the risk of disease transmission. So, because the p-value for these two variables were less than 0.5, we can reject the null hypothesis that said there will be no relationship and conclude that there is a relationship between knowledge and attitude in young adults. And this would indicate that there's a positive correlation between both variables, that when knowledge and attitude increase, the risk of disease transmission will decrease. Secondly, the correlation coefficient for both knowledge and perception was 0.274. This was based on 100% of participants responding, and the p-value for these two variables were 0.004. So the hypothesis used to test for this p-value once again was young adults with knowledge about sexually transmitted disease will reduce disease transmission, and the null there will be no relationship between knowledge and disease transmission reduction. And secondly, young adults with a positive perception of sexually transmitted infection would decrease the risk of contracting and transmitting disease. And the null, there will be no relationship between a positive perception and the reduction of the risk of contracting and transmitting disease. So, again, because the p-value for this was less than 0.5, we also would reject the null and conclude that there is a positive correlation between both knowledge and a positive perception in the reduction of sexually transmitted diseases in young adults. Lastly, the correlation coefficient for both attitude and perception was a 0.223. And based on all of the participants responding, the p-value for this was less than 0.020, which also indicates that we can reject the null hypothesis and conclude that there's a positive correlation between positive attitude and a positive perception in the reduction of sexually transmitted diseases between young adults. And now my colleague Ashley Roll will speak to you about the implications and recommendations, and she will also conclude with our research.
Good day, everyone. My name is Ashley Rule, and I will be speaking on our recommendation portion of our presentation. After careful analysis of our data, we realized that knowledge, perception, and attitude actually do have an impact on sexually transmitted infection. It was discovered that once awareness is increased, the risk of acquiring sexually transmitted diseases decreases. Therefore, it is our first recommendation for the government to implement new health policies. It is our belief that with these new health policies, it will allow all healthcare professionals to work under one umbrella and all of them to be on one accord. With the introduction of the new health policies, more people will become aware that sexually transmitted infection is a problem in our country. It would also allow them to research and try to find out what is an STI, how do you get an STI, and ways to prevent STIs. It is believed that with this knowledge, more STI transmission would decrease, or the STI transmission would decrease. Our next recommendation is to implement health sexual education programs in our school. With these educational programs, it will allow students in high school in particular to learn more about sexually transmitted infection. Though they are not our age group of that study, because our study is from 18 to 56, it would allow individuals to understand what sexual transmitted infection is from an early age. It would also allow them to understand more about sex, mainly because in high school, it is where many people experience their first sexual encounters. They experiment with sexual activity because they do not know the consequences. It is our belief that if we make them aware of how to stay protected, instead of saying no, do not have sex, we try to encourage them that if they do use protection, it can decrease sexually transmitted infection. It also can make them become aware that though they are young, they can still contract things, diseases in particular, that they can carry throughout their lives. With this, we also recommend that counseling be available for students who are sexually active. Not because something is wrong with them, but because once they start engaging in sexual activity, they stand a chance of increased sexual transmitted infection. We want them to feel comfortable because they have already talked about sex in the classrooms, so it should be more easier to express themselves with a counselor. They can get help, they can get advisement, and they can be more comfortable, and we as a country and as a people can feel more comfortable to know that we're trying to protect our youth. We aren't trying to keep them away from something to make them run towards it more. For this study, our implication is to provide evidence-based practice that can not only benefit us here in the Bahamas, but many of the Caribbean countries and even the United States. It was important to do this study because there's little information on sexually transmitted infection in the Bahamas, in the Caribbean at large. This research would allow the policymakers to utilize everything that we have researched to learn or to come up with ways that they can help combat sexually transmitted infection. It would also help benefit healthcare providers because they would now come up with more interventions to implement with their patients and the people in the healthcare system. In conclusion, sexually transmitted infection is a rising problem. Though it has been around for a while, it still remains a problem not only in the United States but also in the Bahamas. It is our belief that if knowledge, perception, and attitudes about sexual transmitted infections is increased, the risk of acquiring sexually transmitted infections would decrease.